Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for a few more to join. If you just give us a couple of minutes. Just waiting on a few more to join. Okay, I think we'll get a start. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another CHP Australia webinar. We're joined today by the wonderful Gillian Fish, author of new book, Resilience, Body, Mind and Soul, and founder and CEO of 6am Agency. We've been lucky to have Gillian speak with us in the past, and probably a few months ago she spoke on marketing in difficult times. The session got wonderful reviews, so we're excited to have her back again today. Please welcome Gillian Fish.
David, good morning. Thank you very much. And Brenda, thank you too. To the CHP members, I'm honoured to be with you today. We know it's very busy times, and for you to spend a little bit of time with us to talk about a topic that is very dear to my heart, resilience, are born out of a project that I commenced right at the beginning of lockdown. But before I go into that, I would like to introduce you to, or let you know, that Dr. Joseph Maroon, who is one of the world's most highly acclaimed neurosurgeons, will be joining us today. I will first take you through the concept and what I've learned from this book, Resilience, and then I will have an interview one-on-one with Dr. Maroon about his philosophy on how to build, hold, and maintain resilience in times of adversity. Dr. Maroon comes from an integrative medicine background. He is highly regarded, and in fact, in the last few weeks, has been awarded the Clinician of Courage Award to a physician who has led thriving during this time. So I'm deeply honored. Welcome, Dr. Maroon, and I look forward to connecting with you in the next half an hour.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Dr. Maroon is with us live from Pittsburgh in the United States of America. So what I'd like to do is very quickly share with you where my inspiration came from to write this book. I would like to ask you to cast your minds back to around about March 23. That was around the time that most of us went into lockdown. And let me acknowledge now that there are many of you who are joining us from Melbourne who are in lockdown again. It is not an easy time. It is deeply challenging. Some of you would have been at Expo West, come back in March and been literally in quarantine and lockdown all of this time. So strength and courage to you. So how did this happen? As I said, cast your minds back to around March 23. And I was sitting at my computer with my entire agency facing me, faces a little bit bewildered, some a little bit amused. You know, this was the first time that we were having meetings by Zoom, taking pictures, etc. And I was sat there and I thought to myself, Jill, what is it that you need to do now to lead through this time with strength and courage, with 3 objectives in mind, which most of you as leaders in the industry would have thought about. Number 1, and first and foremost, is how do I take care of my team? Physically, they need to remain safe. We have a virus lurking around. Secondly, their mental health and well-being, of course. Then the next thing was, how do I take care of our clients? Our clients were accelerating their work, their needs, those in the health industry, some were putting things on hold, and so forth. How we were going to adapt to this time with agility. And then the third thing was, how would I take care of the business, my business, during this time? And what I thought of myself was I needed to do something that had 2 things. Number 1 is it needed to be distinctive. It needed to stand out from the rest of the crowd. Secondly, as I follow in my own life, it needed to have purpose. It needed to bring value to people so we could all learn. And therein lay the idea. It came to me. I'd already written one book. It came to me that at this time, what I should do is connect with some of these world leaders who I've had the deep honor to know and grow relationships with during the course of my 18 years in owning this agency, and establish from them their philosophy on how to build resilience, how to actually survive in the first instance and thrive. And I'm calling it Wellness 2.0. Up until now, all of the work that I've done and we've done together with these people has generally been around using integrative medicine and integrative healthcare in order to maintain immunity, to maintain physical health. But there was another layer to that. We now needed to look at the mind and the soul, so spirituality, hence the name Body, Mind, and Soul. So that happened on the 23rd. I was sitting in front of my computer, and then on April 5, I started. That was my birthday. It is a birthday I shall never forget. And what I did was I started to connect with 21 world experts right in the height of the pandemic who were gracious enough to talk with me at this time, many of them pressed and pressured by their patients or having gone into lockdown, having their own challenges, to talk with them. I asked them each 12 questions, and each of them came up with some similar themes that ran throughout the book. And this is where my presentation comes in. Today, what I'm going to do is share with you those top 10 themes that ran resoundingly through every single interview that I did. So on your screen, you can see Dr. Maroon, who actually happens to be obviously on this call, was number one in our chapter. He had graciously accepted an opportunity to be interviewed in my first book. Anish Bajaj, who's a chiropractor in New York. Dr. Andrew Monk, who is from Australia. He's actually a philosopher, but it leans into the environment. Ron Ehrlich and so forth. So 10 from the United States, 3 from Europe, and the balance from Australia, all absolute leaders in their field. So I called it at the time, the synopsis, or what I took out of this is that this actually has become for us what we call the Great Reset. And what does that mean? It means at this time we've had a pause in our life, which has enabled us, actually many of us, to really reconsider what we're about, what we're doing on this planet, and how we can move forward in our lives. So the question I asked was why do some people survive and even thrive in the face of adversity? And one of the quotes that kept on coming up through many of the interviews, interestingly enough, was from a philosopher, a gentleman named Viktor Frankl, who some of you may well have heard of. And I would write this down if I were you. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and he was a Holocaust survivor. And Viktor Frankl wrote this: between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So contrary to many people losing their lives, millions of businesses going out of business, millions of people losing jobs, however difficult the moment is, the concept that we can actually take control of the moment and turn it into something that enables us to traverse this time was a thread that ran throughout the book and through all my interviews. So as Sabina Reid, who's a famous Australian psychologist, said, resilience is our capacity to cope and grow in the face of adversity. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to take you through the top 10 themes, as I said, that were resoundingly apparent throughout every interview. And I'm quoting you, Dr. Maroon, here, and Dr. Maroon is obviously going to share his deeper insights when we talk a bit later. But the first theme that ran throughout was, number one, was the need to stop time and actually consider who we are and what our purpose is in life. So this time has enabled us to stop and think about actually what are we in control of and what aren't we, right? If you think about Viktor Frankl, he was hardly in control of anything, catastrophic in the Holocaust. But if we are looking at finding our purpose, We need to peel back the layers and say to ourselves, why are we on this planet? What legacy do we want to leave behind? Most of us really are born to serve others and help others, and what we want to do is we want to accelerate that and amplify that. So in terms of finding that spirituality, that purpose, as Dr. Ross Walker spoke about it, he said, finding my purpose is about being on a spiritual journey. It's about saying to myself every day, how can I be better at what I do? And it's not at the work I do necessarily, it's just about what I give to life and what I give to people. And so that was one of the key themes, is why are we here and what legacy do we want to leave behind? Secondly, resoundingly, people said we need to focus on the power of now. And what does that mean? In essence, you see and you read about people saying now we need to be more present. And now more than ever, it's critical in order to build resilience is to anchor ourselves in the moment and say, we are here now. Let us enjoy this moment. Let us be part of this moment. Instead of thinking about the next email we need to send, instead of thinking about the next appointment we have, instead of thinking about what we're going to be doing for our next holiday, likely no travel, but that kind of thing. So how do we anchor ourselves in the moment? And if we are able to do that, we are able to gain control and really be in the moment, which helps build resilience. So the question is how do we do that? And several of those who I interviewed spoke about this. Number one is they said, stop time now and think about how we're breathing. Are we breathing deeply? Are we breathing fast and shallow? Can we slow it down? Can we anchor it? And that's in anything, any meeting, if we're in with our children, if we're talking to somebody. Secondly, is our posture. How are we sitting? How are we standing? How are we leaning into the moment with intent, with real intent to be in the present moment? That's absolutely critical to being really in control of the situation. And the third thing is around concentration and the ability to control our thoughts. These are the things that, if we can take control, really help us build that resilience, keep us in the moment. It cuts all of the chaos. It cuts the pace and some of the angst, which many of us are focusing on and are experiencing. So being focused on the power of now, as Eckhart Tolle talks about it, a very good book to read, is important. The third theme that was apparent throughout was learning and accepting impermanence. So I talk about it as being the only thing that is constant in life is change. In healthcare, we talk about it being about neuroplasticity. So what does that mean? It means if you imagine a river or a stream with the water flowing, life is like a flow of water. But it goes in a stream and a river over small rocks, little pebbles, jagged rocks, around some, over some. And what water does is it's very flexible. It's like neuroplasticity. It has the ability to flex and be agile and to wrap itself around different ways of traversing time. That is what we need to do more and more during this time. And I ask you to think about 6 months ago, if you had said to us, or if you'd said to me, in fact, 6 months ago, that I'd be running an agency most of the time off-site and on Zoom, I would have said to you, you're talking to somebody from Mars. Pat yourselves on the back and say to yourselves, look what we have achieved. It's been amazing. So one small step at a time, we need to become more flexible and need to have that neuroplasticity in order to become stronger and more resilient. The fourth theme, which was around valuing those forgotten moments, which was actually quite sad for me. It's really about, as Dr. Ali Walker said, abundance comes from moments and not things. So not material goods. Many of the people that I interviewed said to me, you know, Jill, I realized that I was only getting home after my children were getting to bed, or I had forgotten to take time to walk outside in nature. And they said, if we can re-establish these micro moments which matter and bring us joy, these forgotten moments, those micro moments can form into some kind of a ripple, which become a wave. And what they do is they strengthen us. They build that resilience, and they help us. When you have a ritual, it helps us actually traverse difficult times because it gives us that structure. So one of the interviewees said to me, when was the last time, Jill, that you stood outside at nighttime and just looked at the stars? Something beautiful, it's simple and easy to do. Or when was the last time that you walked in a park and you listened to the wind in the trees? Or when you sat with your children or your friends and were present in the moment and enjoyed that moment? And they said, regain that control of those important micro moments and rituals, and you'll feel stronger. The next theme that ran throughout resoundingly was the need and the importance of cultivating gratitude and expressing appreciation in order to build strength. And there's a famous doctor, Dr. Martin Seligman, who spoke about the action of embracing gratitude that actually resets the brain and has been known to overcome negativity. I encourage you to read some of those works. So the more we embrace gratitude, the more we realize that we are far better off than the next person, that we've got more to be grateful for, however difficult that moment is. Somebody may have lost their job, they've lost their business, terrible, terrible trauma and stress. Somebody may have lost a loved one. I lost my brother during this time, not to COVID, but to cancer. And I remember him saying to me, Julie, I'm pleased that we can spend this time together. It was via Zoom, and because he was in South Africa. And he said, you know, if we didn't have COVID at this time, we would have been overrun with visitors. And I'm pleased for my family that they've had this time in peace and quiet. And he kept connection with people on social media. And that was immense gratitude, right? So it's about how do we find gratitude in the smallest things and find that joy. Number 6 is building community. And who more than Australians to know what the strength of community does to pull us together? Think about the Boxing Day tsunami. Think about the bushfires. All of the challenges that this country has faced and how we as a community pull together. A community does not have to be 50 or 100 people. It can be 3. We just have to cultivate that community, those who we are watching out for, who can lean into us and our needs and help give us that strength, fill up our tank in order to help traverse this time. And I'll never forget interviewing Gerald Quigley, who I'm sure most of you on this call would know about. Gerald is a fine man who has donated his time to the industry for decades. And Gerald, when I interviewed him, it was Schizophrenia Awareness Week, and he was deeply concerned. He said to me, Jill, but we've gone into lockdown and there are people living with schizophrenia, and yet they need connection. They need community. What's going to happen to them? He also spoke about some of his friends who are seniors in groups who had become isolated. And what he was trying to do was say, how do we remain connected as a community? So the point here is, and this again, throughout many of the interviews was, how do we build community and connection during this time in order to remain strong or build resilience, in order to help those who may be experiencing this in a more traumatic way than we are, to get through this time and ultimately survive but thrive. Number 7 is, of course, that this would be a theme throughout the book when I've interviewed all of these world leaders in health and well-being. They are born to serve. A doctor, a naturopath, a psychologist, a pharmacist, whoever they are born naturally to serve. But the point was that it's serving without expecting anything in return. And what does that mean? It means that it takes us away from ourselves and it makes us focus on others. So firstly, we know that that brings perspective. We know that that gives us that strength when we are giving to others. It also starts to unlock gratitude, right? So there are a number of things that connect here. The point is that if we are going to serve, it's like, how many random acts of kindness can we do every day or every week? What can we do to serve others, which in turn will give us that strength and build resilience? Theme number 8 was live only with what we need. And Dr. Anish Bajaj, who is from New York, said this to me: Jill, this time has shown us that there are 3 things we need to focus on. Number 1 is, what do we need from a material perspective? And don't we know that this planet needs relief from the ongoing consumerism, as conscious consumers we need now in order to give it a breathing space, but we also need it for ourselves. There are hundreds of millions of us who live a life of clutter in terms of material goods, and that actually is not enabling us to live a life which is free and has freedom of being. Secondly, we need to look at the relationships that we have. Who are we connected with? Who fills our bucket? Who gives us joy? And what are the relationships that we need to slowly and gently let go in order to make sure that we are only focusing what is essential to us? And the third thing, and critically, we have been living a life that is busy, 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 busy. It doesn't help us. What we've got to do is, several of them spoke about it, including Dr. Bajaj, is focus and do the things that matter and enrich our lives. Try and cut some of the clutter. Don't make 5 arrangements, a young mother with young children on a weekend. Spend time at home and maybe see a friend once. So that idea around essentialism, in order to regain control of our lives, and I'm not talking about not having pace. In business, there is pace now. Make no bones about that. We have to keep that up. That's just how it is. But it's being busy. It's not having the things in our lives that we don't need. Number 9 is the need to connect deeply with the environment. And this was resoundingly through multiple of the interviews. In terms of connecting the environment, several of the leading experts spoke about the need for, by strengthening resilience, as Dr. Donohoe says here, we need to have respect for the planet, and in turn, that will build the bridge between our own internal health and well-being, our body, mind, and soul, and we will be more in sync with the environment. For if you think about it, in fact, this crisis started with a bat in a cave with a virus, which man has meddled with. And it's shown us that we are not masters of our universe. We are citizens. And in order to really gain and regain good health and well-being, we need to be cognizant, mindful, and in sync with how we connect with the environment. Go for a walk later this evening or today, if you can, on the grass, barefoot. Connect with the environment. Walk in the sand on the beach. Do things. Go and walk for a walk in the park and feel the trees and the wind in the trees, and do things which actually enhance our environment. And I'm sure Dr. Maroon will touch a little bit later on those things which are environmental toxins, which we also need to be cognizant of to keep out of our lives and minimize. And number 10, which is the final theme that I'll take you through, is taking ownerships of your thoughts. So this is absolutely critical. And it really circles back to what Viktor Frankl spoke about. Even in catastrophic times, we are able to take control of our thoughts. Our thoughts are alive, and we are the masters of our thoughts. And if we can control those thoughts, we are able then to become stronger. Even if it's one small step at a time, we can reframe our thinking. Are we seeing this as a time of deep trauma? And if we are, who is helping us and who can lean in and help us? If we are seeing this as a multifaceted challenge, not a trauma, how do we take those challenges and reframe the thoughts just one step at a time? Perhaps saying, what can we learn from this? How do we make things better? Or if we're seeing it as an adventure, or if we're seeing it as a time to let go of, a job we haven't been happy in, or relationships that are unfulfilling. I saw this as a time of huge opportunity to lean in and learn more about resilience, about strength, about how we would traverse this time. So ultimately, here are the top 10 themes which I've spoken to you about. Number one, in order to build mental resilience, is finding our purpose. Number two is discovering the power of now. Number three is accepting impermanence and challenge as the norm. It's going to be there. How do we flow over the stones? How do we develop that neuroplasticity? The next one is valuing those macro moments, building rituals that become ripples and that give us strength. Cultivating gratitude, which we know is an absolute fundamental pillar of resilience. Finding community, connecting, leveraging, harnessing our togetherness. Serving others, which takes us out of our own story and helps others without expecting anything in return. Living with only what we need, essentialism, that's absolutely critical. Connecting with the environment, hand in hand, going hand in hand with health and well-being, physical health and well-being. And lastly, taking ownership of our thoughts. So these are the top 10 themes that came out of every single interview from the brilliant people that I interviewed and had the great opportunity of talking to in the middle of this pandemic. Some game changer actions now. Dr. Ali Walker really summed it up well. She said, Jill, this is my resilience GPS. So if we only do 3 things, start with harnessing and gratitude. Be thankful for what we have and use the energy to focus on others. Have perspective. Realize what is important and what's not. Realize what you can control and what you can't. And lastly is surrendering. Most of what happens to us in our external environment is out of our control. What we can control is our inner response to environment, as difficult as it may seem. So there may be some people that we need to help ourselves, and there may be others who who can actually help us. So the last slide that I'm going to show you now is a couple of tips, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to open up to a series of questions for Dr. Maroon to share his outstanding philosophies. So the next step to resilience, seek a mentor, get connected. There are many people out there who are happy to help, be it in your workplace, be it in your community, in your religious group, in just your friends. Take care of yourself. Breathe more. That's so important because breath is the beginning of life. And without breath, we have no life and we have no joy. Walk into that meeting or sit down and think about exactly how am I breathing? How do I anchor in the moment? And think about your posture. Sleep better. Eat cleaner. Move often. These are all powerful tools to build strength and resilience. Set goals and act. Even if they are tiny goals, say to yourself, today, at the end of today, I'm going to start a gratitude journal. I'm going to write down 3 things every day that I'm grateful for. Be deliberate about learning new things about yourself. In our agency, we've got lots of training going on, and online there are $10 courses on self-improvement and things around craft and so forth. Embrace that. Do a course a week, upskill. Embrace the notion that life is not a straight line and expect those curveballs because that's what it's about. And pat yourselves on the back and say, look what we've done in the last 6 months. Maintain perspective. Is this a life or death matter? And yes, for some it is. But no matter how difficult, there needs to be something in between that can give us that perspective. Look for new opportunities. Help others. Live to learn and learn from experiences. Find laughter. And importantly, never ever give up. Just know that there are people out there to help. We know that there are lots of people doing it tough at the moment, and there are lots of people to help. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read the last quote from Dr. James Wilson, also a very famous American naturopathic doctor who actually coined the phrase adrenal fatigue the 21st century stress syndrome, highly regarded in his field. He said, Jill, it's not just finding joy in challenging times, it's finding joy in life. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and I'm going to welcome Dr. Maroon. Dr. Maroon, if you'd like to just jump on the screen, and I'll introduce you in detail. Thank you. So welcome, Dr. Maroon. It's an absolute honor to have you with us today. As I said, Dr. Maroon has just been awarded the Clinician of Courage Award for leadership during this time. And truly, this was after the book. I knew Dr. Maroon was #1 in my chapter before. And so I want to really sing your praise and just read very quickly your background from a medical perspective. So Dr. Maroon is an award-winning professor and vice chairman of the Department of Neurological Surgery and Heindler Scholar in Neuroscience at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. He's regarded as a premier specialist in the surgical treatment of injuries and diseases of the brain and spine, specializing in minimally invasive procedures. He's been consistently listed in America's best doctors for the past 20 years, and he's an international referral base, including numerous professional athletes and celebrities. I'll let you know as well, Dr. Maroon is currently and still is a triathlete, which is unbelievably inspirational. Dr. Maroon, I won't share your age. You can share that if you wish to later, but somebody that we aspire to learn from a body, mind, and soul perspective. I had the very good fortune and honor of meeting Dr. Maroon many years ago through the Australasian Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, which promotes and supports education in integrative health and medicine. So without further ado, I'd like to start this interview with you, Dr. Maroon. Firstly, welcome to Australia, albeit via webinar. How are you today?
Thank you so very much, Julian. That was truly an outstanding and superb summary of all of the very good things that you've collated in your book, the very excellent book that I've enjoyed and shared with many of my own friends. I'm very well, thank you. I'm very blessed and very fortunate to do what I do, be where I am, and I can assure you I'm extremely grateful for all of the good things that, and actually I must say, I'd add some of the bad things that have happened in my life as well. We're talking about adversity, and adversity is that ability to bounce back, if you would, from adversity. From resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity. And so it's a paradox that you can't develop resilience without adversity. And as you said, it's not the adversity, but it's how we handle it that determines the path of our lives. So, I'm very happy to discuss the award you mentioned, which is almost a dubious award, but because of surviving, so to speak. So if you'd like me to tell that story, it might contribute to some of the things that many of the writers in your book have stated. And you mentioned very kindly some of my, in quotes, accomplishments. And when I finished my residency in neurosurgery, 4 years of medical school, 6 years of neurosurgery, I was very, very ambitious and wanted very much to become the best at whatever I did. And I was seeking success. And I would also say, maybe not directly, but I also certainly appreciated the amulets of success. A little bit of notoriety, prestige, financial success, the ability to take care of my family in a nice way. Some people in the business world would mention power or control. All of these things of the appurtenances of success I acquired by the time I was 40, 42 years of age. And someone like Icarus, the mythological creature who was cautioned by his father Daedalus, the greatest engineer of ancient Greece, not to fly too high with his successes, lest the sun melt the wings and the wax that was attached to his arms and he plummeted into the sea, nor fly too low, lest the waters of the waves wet the feathers of the wings and pull you into the sea. That was the first real story that I could find about balance. Neither fly too high nor too low. And as Aristotle said, hit the mean between extremes. And I was soaring Icarian-like, you might say, doing research, being appointed the team neurosurgeon to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the best football team in the world, of course, here in the United States. And hopefully the Super Bowl champs this year. We're now 3-0, 3 wins and 0. But it was very heady. But within the course of a week, my father died suddenly of a heart attack at age 60. My wife departed with our 2 children in the middle of winter to another city, and I had to quit neurosurgery. I simply was unable to carry on because of stress, adversity, and my inability to handle adversity. So one week I was doing brain surgery on awake patients, removing tumors from eloquent parts of their brain. Literally the next week, I was living in an abandoned farmhouse and working at a truck stop that my father had bequeathed to my mother, heavily mortgaged, and wondering, how did this happen? You know, what happened to put me into this particular situation? And like Icarus, I literally plummeted into a sea of depression from which I had no way of knowing how to extricate myself from it. Serotonin reuptake inhibitors, antidepressants, psychotherapy, nothing was effective. And for several months, I literally subsisted. I could not function except to fill up 18-wheelers with diesel fuel and flip hamburgers. That was my life. Until one day, the banker who held the mortgage on the truck stop called me and said, "Hey, Joe, let's go for a run." I said, "Run? I'm 20 pounds overweight. I can't walk up a flight of steps without being short of breath." He said, "Come on, you need to do that." I think he wanted to see if I'd be around long enough to pay off the mortgage on the truck stop. I'm not sure how really interested he was on me, but I found a pair of shoes, a pair of sweatpants, and went down to the local high school track and made it around 4 times and said, never again, never again. I was exhausted, I was sore, but that night was the first night I slept in about 3 months. And some little light bulb went off in my brain that said, hey, something happened that enabled you to rest. Why don't you go back again the next day, which I did, and then the next and the next and the next. And pretty soon, to quote Viktor Frankl, as you did in his book, Viktor Frankl wrote, "Success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue as the unintended side effect of pursuing a goal bigger than yourself." And I tell this poignant story for those listening because, Jillian, you pointed out beautifully all the things we should be doing, right? Right. It's a beautiful list. My question is, why don't people do it?
Right.
Why don't they do it? I mean, you listed 10 things that will prevent Alzheimer's disease, cancer, heart disease, and stroke if they do it. But no, not enough people do it. And the answer is why? Why couldn't I pull myself out of my own depressed, suicidal ideation state I didn't. I couldn't. I read the help books. I read books like everything everybody said that you said, and nothing worked until I took those 4 laps around the track. As the unintended side effect of pursuing something bigger than myself, what happened, Jillian? What happened in my brain? Well, several things happened. Number one, without thinking about it, I was resetting my neurotransmitters. My serotonin level went up endogenously without taking a pill. My dopamine levels went up endogenously. My endocannabinoid receptors were stimulated. And I started to feel good. And what's the other thing that happened? As the unintended side effect, I started losing weight. And I started to get a little feeling of self-esteem back. And then at the same time, while I was exercising, what was exercising doing to my brain again? It was creating BDNF. What is BDNF? It's brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's the growth, miracle grow of the brain. What does that mean? I was creating new brain cells. I was increasing the synaptic connections between the brain cells, and I was enhancing my neuroplasticity that you mentioned. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher that you alluded to, 2,500 years ago said, you can never put your foot into the same river twice because it's constantly flowing. That is the definition, Jillian, of neuroplasticity. Your brain is constantly, just like the river, changing from the sensory input, your vision, your olfaction, your taste, your hearing, and your touch are constantly neuromodulating the synaptic connections and the neuroplasticity in your brain. So all of the things you said are great. And that led me back to a life of creativity and the most productive part of my life, because once I discovered exercise, I then realized that I need dietary control. And I needed to clean up the environmental toxins, air, water, pollution that I was living in. And I also realized that one of the most important epigenetic factors above the genes was stress. And how do you control stress? There are 3 ways that modern society uses to control stress. One is pharmacologic. 1 out of 5 women in the United States are on an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication. 1 out of 5, 20%. Number 2 is physiologic. There are ways of modulating brain control now with transcranial magnetic stimulation, photobiomodulation using light, and direct current electrical stimulation to reset our neural tracks. And number 3 is psychological. Meditation, stress control, prayer, and yoga, and exercise, the things that we have available to us to do every day. So what you stated in your beautiful overview was all of the same things that I experienced as the unintended side effect of pursuing something larger than myself. So that's a little bit of a soliloquy, if you would, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
So that's absolutely profound, and that gives us a basis of which we can start to move forward one step at a time. Dr. Maroon, what I'd like to ask you is around your Courage Award now, because we've spoken, you know, a lot about how the body works and so forth, and added in mindfulness. Tell us about your Courage Award during this time and how people can learn from that in terms of taking one step at a time. Bearing in mind, we've got people on this call who are in Melbourne in lockdown, so facing deep challenge. There are a lot of people who are out of work. There are a lot of people who are challenged with failing businesses. What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's kind of tied into the story I just told you, Jillian. The Courage Award was from soaring near the sun to plummeting into the sea, and then extricating myself and coming back to a much more meaningful, contributing, gratitudinous career for the last 25, 30 years. So it was the courage to come back. It really should be called the Survival Award because I was able to survive adversity that really drove me to my knees. And it really stimulated me to write a book that I wrote entitled Square One, A Simple Guide to a Balanced Life. A Simple Guide to a Balanced Life, Square One. And basically what I did in the book, I had people, and all of you listening tonight to this, I want you to do something right now in your mind. I want you to draw a square. On the top of the square, put work. On the right-hand side of the square, put family and social. On the bottom, put spirituality. And on the left-hand side, write the word physical, physicality. Okay, now you have your square in your mind. Now, in your mind, I want you to draw a line commensurate with how much time or effort you put on each of these in your daily life. In other words, how long is your work line? How long is your family line? How long is your spiritual line? And how long is your physical line? Optimally, it should resemble a square. At the time I was living in a truck stop, mine was a flat line EKG. It was all work. There was no family, there was no spirituality, and there was no physical. The physical got me back to the spiritual, got me back to the family, got me back to the work. Maroon axiom, I have an axiom number one. Maroon's axiom number one is you can survive and get by if one of those sides of the square is atrophic or shortened. Axiom number two is if two of the sides or more are atrophic, you should be seeing your psychotherapist, your rabbi, your priest, or your psychiatrist, because you're going to get in trouble and crash and burn at some point in the near future. You can't survive in an unbalanced state with two or more out of balance or not considered. You know, we've known for a long time that the brain harbors a biological equivalent of a car's fuel gauge. And it's the homeostatic system that's built into our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that leads to adrenal fatigue that you mentioned, that we sense in ourselves. It tells us our biological needs, not only food, water, and sleep, but also how to handle stress and how bad the stress is. I compare it to a tachometer on a car. Every day when I get into my car, I look at my tachometer and I see the red zone. Where the RPMs get into the red zone, you know you're in trouble. What I was missing in my pursuit of success was mindfulness and awareness. I was totally unaware of the selfish nature of my pursuits for societal success. Totally unaware. I had no mindfulness or awareness of what I was actually doing. And when you lose that, then you're like a leaf in the wind. You're blown whichever way different people or suggestions occur, and you can't sustain that. Hans Selye, a physiologist in Canada in the 1930s, coined the term adaptation syndrome. And what in studying animals, laboratory animals under stress, he said there are 3 phases to adversity. Number 1 is initial resistance. When we or any animal is stressed, we resist. The sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. We resist it. The second is the development of resilience or acceptance. With the stress enables us, gives us the opportunity to build resistance. If we don't build resistance, the third is exhaustion and death. The Japanese have a term for this called karoshi, death by overwork. They have individuals who work 120 hours a week, and they literally died from adrenal fatigue, which is caused by overstimulation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And initially, cortisol is released in huge amounts, which gives us the fight or flight with adrenaline. But then our adrenal glands atrophy, our thymus gland, which subserves our immune function, atrophy, and we develop gastric ulcers with no immune system, no adrenal reserve, and die. So that's the sequence that we go through with stress.
Dr. Maroon, thank you. It's been incredible to have you with us. I know that there are a few questions and we've only got about 6 minutes left. I'm sure that people will want to ask. Inspirational, we need to all take our running shoes and take that first step like you or something similar. David, over to you.
Yeah, look, our first question is simplicity the way of the future? Do our children need to develop this trait?
Is simplicity the
way of the future?
Way of the future. You know, that opens up a whole new area. You know, when we think that 99% of human history spent on the African savanna, right? I mean, where we are now, so biologically, we were conditioned, our genes are conditioned to survive, which on a minimalist, simplistic basis, to put it in that context, of just what we needed to survive. Our society now has markedly evolved. I mean, before we lived to eat and survive and procreate, more or less, and have some degree of stress control with the nuclear family. The nuclear family is almost gone in many respects, and that's another subject. But yes, I think the simplest we live, the more balanced we're going to be.
Yep. Gillian, did you want to touch on that?
I think that comes back to Dr. Bajaj's phrase that he uses around essentialism. There is one last thing that I'd like to ask David. I'm not sure if there are any other questions.
There is.
Okay, go for it. Over to
I'll
you.
give this one to you, Gillian. With your wonderful list of 10 things we should do personally, yes, can you give us some examples of things business leaders can do for their teams in this time?
Yes, very good question. I think the first thing is helping our teams really get to grips with what the purpose is, what the why is for them personally, and secondly, profession. Thirdly, I think in a time of intense commercial pressure for most businesses, whether they're doing well or not, it's looking at that essentialism. What is it that we need in our lives? What do we want to achieve? And how do we focus on that? And then the third thing is really from a well-being perspective is try to really infuse that idea around those rituals every single day. And interestingly enough, the previous question was around structure and simplifying things. We know that our younger people really like and crave that structure, so we should help them with that. So I think those are three, and of course there are many others.
I'll give this one to Dr. Maroon. Is there a neurological difference between people who are resilient versus those who are not? Is there a predisposition to resilience?
That's a wonderful question. And the answer is yes. So resilience is contingent and built upon several factors. Number one, genetics, genes. People are genetically predisposed with a specific temperament and also an immune system that is resistant or not resistant. Number two is environmental aspects during development, particularly during the adolescent and very youthful years. We know that animals that are not touched, cuddled, given attention, as well as children, are markedly deprived and do not develop optimally in terms of their brains. These epigenetic factors, our genes are like a blueprint that you lay down on the table. It's the epigenetic factors that tell the genes what to do. The diet, exercise, environmental factors, and stress control. Women, for instance, who smoke pot, who drink alcohol, who have immense or a lot of stress during pregnancy, this epigenetically affects the child in how they later will handle stress, alcohol, drugs themselves. It's clearly an epigenetic factor, transuterine, transplacental, that can determine how the child itself later is resilient or not resilient. So it's a very complicated factor, but all of these things pertain.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Well, I think we'll leave it there. I might just actually do one question, and this is my question actually. You sort of spoke about the unrest that you had and how the exercise helped you sleep. How important do you think sleep is in this equation? Because, I mean, obviously you dream and you reconcile your thoughts for the days in those dreams. So how important is sleep?
Sleep is critical, again, for a healthy existence. So what happens during sleep? Well, what happens during sleep is there's a system called autophagy, means self-eating. But basically, to put it very, very cartoonish, our cells develop garbage, negative products intracellularly. And during sleep, autophagy occurs where the cells are literally cleaned of the detritus, so to speak. And it enables them to function at a higher level again. Yeah. And also synaptic connections are pruned or reinforced during sleep, so that our neuroplasticity, our cognitive ability is clearly impacted by the quality of our sleep. So it's, again, very essential to optimal performance.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph and Gillian, for joining us today. I got a lot out of hearing you speak, Dr. Maroon. It's great with somebody with your success and your community standing can speak about a troubled time in their life. Often people think, you know, somebody of your success and your caliber may not have these challenges. And I think it's quite common for us all to have these sort of challenges. So thank you very much for sharing your story. Thank you, Gillian, as always. Wonderful. And we appreciate you being here today.
Great pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, David. Stay well.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Gillian has agreed to share the slides, and we will also share a recording of today's talk as well, which I encourage you to share with your team. I'm sure lots of people are finding things difficult at the moment, and I'm sure everyone will get a lot of value out of it. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.